So today we're going to be looking at filling in our color wheel. We're going to start with our primary colors in watercolor. So I just need to get a little bit on here, and I'm going to find the space that says red, and I'm going to carefully go inside those lines as much as I can and fill in the space that's red. We're going to get to our color mixing here in just a little while. But first, let's go through the primaries. Red would be our first primary color. What are some of our other primary colors? Yellow and blue. We want to try and get this as even as possible, so I go back and I spread paint all over it. Before I pick up yellow, I go all the way to the bottom of my bucket, wash my brush on the bottom, wipe off, not tap because tapping will splatter, but I wipe off the extra, and then I pick up my yellow and I find my yellow box. You always want to double check to make sure the word says yellow or your color that you're actually painting before you start painting. Once you put this down, it doesn't wash back off. And then we're going to do our last one of blue. Now we have our red, yellow, and blue primary colors. We want to start making our secondary colors, orange, green, and violet, or sometimes it's known as purple. Now, red is a really strong color, so when I mix my yellow and my red, orange is between those two, right? I want to add my light color first because I don't need to add very much red at all to this to turn it orange, okay? Rinse my brush off, and this time I'm going to leave water in my brush, and I'm just going to tap a little bit in the red, tip my brush this direction to let the red spread into some of that water in there. I'm going to try the corner first. And it's already looking a little red in there, so I can rinse my brush out so that it's just water in here now. And I'm going to pull that red across. You'll see as I do that, it's blending with the yellow to make orange. If you need to add a little bit more on this side, you can mix that in. And you get a nice orange color. If you wanted a little bit darker orange, you would add just a little bit more red to it. And you'll notice it stays wet on the paper, doesn't dry really fast. This is a nice watercolor paper, just like that. And so now we have red, orange, yellow. To get green, we mix yellow and blue. Sort of the same as last time. Blue is a really strong color, so I'm going to start with yellow, since that's my color to the side, and fill it in first with the yellow. Then I'm going to go back the same way with the blue and get just a little bit with a wet brush. Mix it in, and I can rinse my brush out and go back and mix those two to start getting a nice green. If it's too light, it's a little lime green for me. I'm going to go back, scrub some more blue into it to make it a little bit darker green. The other way you can mix colors, which would be off the paper, is over here in your color palette. So if you wanted to make a green in your color palette, you could pick up a bunch on your brush and wipe it into this little tray. Then you pick up a little bit and you could mix it right here in the tray to make a nice green color. And then you could transfer that over here onto your paper. Last one we're going to do is violet or purple, which means we have to mix the blue and the red, so the ones on each side. And these ones are both equally strong colors, but blue is a little stronger than red. So we're going to do the red first and put it in there, just like that. And we're going to go back with some of our blue to get our violet color. Now, mixing blue and red to get purple is a little bit trickier. It doesn't look like purple right away. It has to dry a bit, but it does eventually get to more of a purple color once you keep adding it in. I add in a little bit at a time because you can't take it back out. You can only add it in to get those colors. Now, these are all still wet, so I'm going to be really careful when I go in between to what are called our tertiary colors. So our primary were red, yellow, blue. Our secondaries were orange, green, and purple. And now we're going to do tertiaries, our third colors, that go in between. So if I'm looking for red, orange, I'd mix red and orange to get red, orange. Orange and yellow to get orange, yellow. Yellow and green to get yellow, green. Green and blue to get green, blue. Blue and purple to get blue, purple. And purple and red to get a purple red color. I'm going to speed up this part of the film because you should already know how to mix these up and you get the idea, but I'm going to let you see what I'm doing. So once you finish with your color wheel, go ahead and separate those out to your primaries, secondaries, and then your tertiaries again out at the bottom. This will be a little bit more challenging when you're not looking up here. You might have to reference back to see what two colors go together to make them in these boxes. Now we're going to look at shade and tint, and we're going to do this a little bit more efficiently. We're only going to do your primaries and secondaries, but to do shade, you're going to add black. So we're going to use the watercolor pencils of black and white to work on this part, and I want you to very gently add just a little bit of black for your tints. You don't need to add a whole bunch. It's a pretty strong color. And then what we'll do once you've finished adding that in pretty smoothly is you can go back in and pick up some of your red, and you're going to paint the red, and I do this with a little bit of a swirly motion, and it activates the black watercolor pencil and will give you a shade of red. See how you've added the black and the red together, and now it gives you a shade. We're going to do that for your primary and secondary colors all the way around. So you can see by adding a little bit of black to each of those that we now have a shade. The next thing we want to do is on the inside, we want to add a tint, and so we do that with white. So instead of a black watercolor pencil, we're going to use a white one. These are a little bit more difficult to see because you're putting white on white paper, so you'll need to follow along with your eyes and remember to go nice and close to each other and keep your hands up off your paper, especially if it's still wet. You don't want to smudge any of your wet spaces. Same thing when you're coloring in with those pencils. If it's still a little bit wet or damp, you might want to wait, or just be super careful you're not touching the wet spaces. Once you have all of the white in there, you're going to go through and add those colors the same way as you did the black ones. So now you notice this got a little thick over here, a little too dark. I want to keep it a tint. So I'm going back with my brush and letting the brush absorb the paint and then brushing it over onto my napkin over here to keep it nice and light. Let's see what we do with the blue. I only add a little bit and I rinse out my brush, and then all I add back in is water. I don't add any more color to it. I just use what's already there to mix the white in with the blue. Now the other thing you can do in watercolor with this is you can just add a whole bunch of water instead of adding actual white watercolor to it. And when you add water, it makes it more transparent so that you can see that white paper naturally. Now see, you can tell where I've touched here, and it's going to try and get dark and bleed over, so I'm going to dry off my brush. And I'm just going to go in and I'm going to roll it and pick it up. It acts like a sponge so that it doesn't keep spreading. I like this a few times. You should always have a napkin nearby when working with watercolors to dry off your brush. I'm going to work on making our orange. Mix those two together. And have them come out. A little too much red. And again, if you feel like it's too dark, you can always go through, pick some back up off your paper with that brush, dry it off. There we go. Now, if you would like to fill in the rest of these using only colored pencils, you can try that extra challenge for yourself. Otherwise, this can move to the drying rack.